There was a little 5-minute delay. Sorry. Thank you. Hi.
No, hey, you're on. That's all that matters.
I know I was fingers crossed.
Yeah. Just keep them crossed till about 6 o'clock. And then after that,
Right. Across my legs.
thanks. I need all the help
thanks
I
for
can get.
waiting.
Okay, Margie, we're all set.
Okay, fine. I would like to officially call to order the meeting of the New Shore Planning Board for Wednesday, February 9th at 4 o'clock by Zoom. The first item on for its discussion is discuss possible amendments relating to the zoning ordinance, section 513, accessory apartments. This is a preliminary, I want to emphasize, this is a preliminary discussion. We will have a great deal more in the next month or two as we hear from various groups. I don't know, Jen, whether there are any groups here tonight that would like to give us a quick presentation of what they're thinking, or whether we'll just go with a board discussion.
If anyone would like to speak about section 513, just please raise your hand by pressing *9.
I'm assuming there's nobody.
Nope, you have someone. It's just there's a delay, so I just want to make sure that.
Okay, fine, I'll hold.
Jen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just letting you know, I am on the line. Right now, I'd just love to hear what the planning board discussion is, and if you need me, I'm here.
Thank you. That's Cindy Pappas, in case anyone didn't recognize her voice.
Thank you. Okay, we have a memo from Allison where she has pointed out a number of things that we might want to discuss. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison and let her talk us through it. Granted, we will have, as I said, this is preliminary discussion. We'll have more down the road, but let's start with a couple of suggestions where Allison wants some input. So let me turn it over to her. Allison?
Sure. Okay, so the last time the planning board discussed this was during your December meeting. And if you recall, it was potential amendments were originally initiated by the Block Island Housing Board had noticed that within subsection A of 513, it assigned them responsibility for monitoring 513 apartments. So they had written a letter to the planning board recommending that that responsibility be assigned to the town or different parties. So we started looking at the ordinance and the conversation kind of expanded from there, where planning board members thought, well, since we're going into potentially make some edits, are there other improvements that could potentially be made, such as making the ordinance a little more flexible? You know, overall, it's pretty successful. It's been able to produce a number of attainable housing units. Could we make it, could we improve it in any way? So we have, and there was also maybe some potential clarifications needed on permitted density, like 1 unit in residential, but commercial, there's been some projects where the question about how many 513s on one lot is permitted has come up. And also the discussion about building official being assigned responsibilities within this section, where zoning official would now be more appropriate. So those are a number of general areas that we have been discussing for potential amendments to this section. And I'll walk you through. So in regards to subsection B, where the Block Island Housing Board is assigned responsibility, it's only for those units that would be considered affordable by like the Low and Moderate Income Housing Act, or maybe even within the 140% locally. So we're talking about deed restricted, not, and what we've learned is that currently no 513 apartments on the island are deed restricted and receiving that tax benefit that we're aware of, right? We've checked with the tax assessor on that. So it's currently not being utilized, so maybe we need to take a look at that subsection and how that should be used. And then the discussion about right now, there's a maximum of 2 bedrooms and a maximum size. So, you know, in the cases where there might be existing structures that could serve that purpose, but they might be a little bit larger, that had come up as a potential recommendation from some planning board members to be considered. And then I guess lastly, I want to bring up, and maybe we didn't get into this too much in December, but several years ago, the town had adopted a subsection F to this ordinance for town employee accessory apartments. So 513s on town-owned property would be allowed, they'd be allowed more units, up to 4 513s, to give the town more flexibility in order to provide necessary housing for people providing, you know, municipal services, town employees. So that had sunset in December of 2020. And the town is looking at, I guess, trying to come up with some plans for potential 513 units on town-owned property, and would need that ordinance to be, you know, to go, that subsection to be enacted again in order to implement those plans. So that's something that the planning board might want to provide a recommendation on, whether or not to send to the town council a recommendation to remove that sunset clause and put back in that subsection F that's included within your packet. You can see the language there. So that's something I want the planning board to discuss tonight as well. So that's the
Thank you.
summary. I'll, you know, obviously we can discuss anything in further detail.
Okay, why don't we start, since you just mentioned the subsection F, why don't we start with that? I know a number of people were on the board when we put this into effect a few years ago, but I know several people have joined us since then. We meaning the planning board at the time was very happy with this subsection. We realized that certain properties would need this in order to expand, so we were quite happy with it. But I'd like to hear from the people who've joined the board within the last several years, if you have questions, concerns, thoughts, so forth.
Specific to F, you said, the termination,
Yeah,
abandonment,
we'll
and
start with
release?
F and then we'll work our way backwards. The reason, since Allison brought it up, I thought I'd start with F. So let's go just with F at this moment. If nobody has any questions and concerns, then we'll work backwards to several of the other items that have been highlighted.
Sorry,
things we
Chris.
wanted to discuss.
Yeah, Chris raised the point F. So there's 2 Fs, sorry, in your packet. So we're talking
Oh,
about,
okay.
because things had been changed a couple times. So we're talking about not the abandonment section right now. Margie was saying, talk about the town employee
Standard.
accessory apartments where the town would be
Accessory
allowed up
apartments.
to 4. And there would be development plan review before the planning board. So that's where the town would need to, you know, they need to know that this ordinance is on the books and available before investing in planning and design for potential projects. You need to know that the zoning is there before designing and exploring options, I guess, on town properties.
So where would this be applicable? I mean, you say town properties, I'm just trying like for Faulkner or for Thomas
well,
or
we had-
for,
It was for Thomas property when we were working to create more housing on that piece of property. And I'm sure it will be applicable to other properties, but Thomas was the one we particularly had in mind.
why would, and forgive my ignorance, I guess, is why would this need a separate section for that, the Thomas property? Right now, I guess I don't understand why this is needed specifically for town employee accessory apartments.
The purpose of this was to provide greater density. So it's really the same type of unit. It's just that 4 would be allowed on one lot versus in private residential property, only one 513 is permitted. So
So-
this allows up to 4 on any town-owned property.
So that's not a zoning? Couldn't you just zone it for bigger, more density?
Well,
Yeah, this is zoning.
This is zoning, this section, that's how it's,
I guess I'm like 513, there has to be, as I understand it, there's an existing single family dwelling. And this would allow, so I guess I'm trying to look at town properties and where is there an existing single family dwelling where where this would be applicable? I just
The
don't,
town.
I'm not in disagreement with it. I'm just trying to see how this would apply to current circumstances and just to wrap my head around it. For the Thomas property, there is a single family dwelling, but there's also a home that has, I don't know if you'd call them accessory apartments, but I don't know how many are in there. And I know there was,
there's 2 in there in the
There's 2.
existing Thomas house, and
Yeah.
So this amendment, which would extend the sunset clause, would allow 2 additional units to be built on that property.
and then the long-term plans were actually to add more units or a unit above the garage or possibly on the other side of the property.
Right, so that's all in discussions, and but the town needs the amendment to take place in order to allow those units to be created.
I
And
do
that
want to
town-
back up a little. Chris, you raised that was a good question on the, it's an accessory use, so I believe it does need to have a main, there needs to be a main use on the property, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a single family dwelling as the main use. So,
To be the sewer plant, that's,
right.
have
So for-
one,
Right,
right.
there's 513 there. So there are more lots that are town owned that would be applicable and eligible.
right,
I'm in agreement with this guy. Actually, I think I've suggested every time the town builds a new building, they ought to incorporate employee housing in it. I fought for that down in Old Harbor and it was defeated, but this, I guess my concern is 4 enough, is when you're looking at pieces of property like Thomas, is 4 enough? Or is the piece of land large enough that it could be subdivided and another 4 be added? I'm not, I just,
Yeah, well, let me go, when we looked at this many years ago, we also wanted to be very careful not to change the character of the neighborhood. So there is a fine balance between adding more property, affordable housing, and making sure that we don't change the character of the neighborhood. Now, we all know that there are several units already on several different properties in that area. So we came up with the number 4. I'm not sure there's any magic to that number, but we were very careful to try and balance both sides of the question, which is one of the things the planning board is supposed to do. So that's how we came up with the 4. Is that the correct number? Well, we thought so at the time, but we're going to back to revisit. We may want to look at something different, but we want to make sure we don't change the character of the neighborhood.
which I understand, Margie. I mean, I live in the neighborhood with this particular piece of
Well,
property
better
next
understand you
door.
live in
So,
the neighborhood.
you gotta remember that sea winds and then there's, there's quite a few dwellings all the way over to this lot, and we have, the medical center, the school. When I look
That's what I'm
at
saying.
specifically
I'm
the
not
Thomas
sure.
property,
That's why I'm agreeing with you that 4 may not be we thought it was the right number. A few years ago, we may decide it is not now, but because this is also applicable to any other town-owned property on the island,
right?
we need to be very careful that we balance the character of the neighborhood with the change as far as attainable or affordable housing, just because one of the things we do not want to do is to ruin the character of the neighborhood.
Right.
And
That's why I guess
building
I'm
and
asking
might be a problem.
is that for accessory apartments, that number isn't based on anything like lot size or it's just to your point, Margie, not, that was just a number that was thought of. And
We
if, for
counted what we
instance,
thought would work.
if there is a property that the town owns, and I don't know if there is, that can accommodate more than that, just based on sheer size of the property, would that, I guess, is that 4 accessory apartments specific to each lot, right? And if is Thomas property subdividable? Technically, I don't know.
I don't know.
I.
Probably doesn't
that's
have the
Alice-
frontage.
Yeah,
He doesn't have
I
the
think it
frontage.
might be, isn't that our, I think it is, well, personally, I think the Thomas property should be a planned unit development, because I think it is over 4 acres in RB zone. But I think that getting back to the topic and a point that Margie made, I just wonder, and what you're making, Chris, there is a small lot over on the west side that the town owns that I don't even know if they know they own it or are recognizing it right now, but it's a small lot and probably 4 units couldn't fit on there, but just thinking about that lot that's available and the possibility of others out there, that I wonder if we should just add a sentence to this standards for town employee accessory apartments that states something that if it's not a densely populated area in these zones that are in neighborhoods with 2 and 3 acres and 1 house on them, how many units, how do we regulate and who calls the shots as to whether 4 units are a good idea in that particular spot? I wonder if Allison can add a sentence that would cover some type of scrutiny when there is a town lot discovered in a not densely populated area.
Would we go to special use permit at a certain threshold?
I
Yeah,
think
I
that's,
think this was.
I guess we
was
also
written-
need to think about, I mean, when you say not in a populated area, more rural, meaning they might not have sewer and water, and then you're gonna have like septic concerns, right? I mean, how much density do you want?
Well, or just a neighborhood that you have, 4 3-acre lots, and then you have a town lot in the middle of it, and all of a sudden there's 4 apartments on it. It will certainly change the character of the neighborhood. But how do you describe that so it's not a matter of opinion? How do you add a sentence so
Oh,
that,
you're saying discourage, sorry, I wasn't sure which direction you're going with that, so
Hmm.
discouraging it in outside of maybe a more urbanized.
I don't want to discourage anything. I just think isn't already densely populated.
So what I'm thinking is that this was written with that Thomas property specifically in mind, and we have to think about it in a more broad sense, rather than just like spot zoning. And
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's very good. Yes.
yeah, so we need language that's more flexible, maybe using percentages or a degree of review for the particular neighborhood, or as the neighborhoods change and as things change, that it's flexible too and applicable, so that we can provide that. I also think that we need to put some language in there that talks about employee housing, town employee housing that's year-round housing as opposed to seasonal employees, or, distinguishing that it's going to be housing that contributes to the year-round community.
I thought that language was there already.
Was it?
I thought so.
I think it's in the first, it's in
Oh,
the
I see,
first
in the overall.
section A, purposes or purpose. Wouldn't that cover it?
If it's section
Also in,
AA and not section, yeah. As long as not,
It's in 4 too, D4.
as long as F is inclusive and not a option to A, yeah.
One other thought is that if there could be a different density depending on whether or not the units would be on water and sewer. Alice alluded to that, but I thought I would specifically mention that might be one of the criteria of a more densely populated area that it had to be on water and sewer.
Yep.
Anyway, Allison, does that give you enough ideas to work on something for next time around?
So what does the planning, are there consensus on changes? I mean, as far as Margie, you just brought up that could be added to maybe the standards of review as a factor, the planning, because all of these projects would go before the planning board for development plan review. And the only applicant would be the town. So, I mean, you're somewhat, there's probably less of a concern than in the density. I'm not sure exactly how you want to approach the density. I don't know if there's consensus on that for, you know, where you want to go with changing no more than 4, having there be some flexibility, or just.
Well, can I ask what, I mean, the existing standards right now, there has to be, meaning if there's going to be a 513 dwelling put on an existing piece of property, there's already, this isn't a special use permit. There's already an existing lot coverage requirement, et cetera. There has to be a, meaning the lot has to be a certain size minimum in order to put a 513 on it.
And it has to have a primary building. Correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess for the density, it should be easy for us to figure out. And Gail mentioned, I don't know what piece of property she's referring to, but we have an inventory of properties.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is specific to employee housing. And before Allison writes up anything, maybe the town properties that this would be applicable to should be looked at, because how many town properties already have an existing dwelling on them? And then once there is an existing dwelling on them, how many town properties will have enough property to add an accessory apartment? And meaning we should be able to quantify it, I think, just before we start. You know, I think Christine hit it on the head. This is specific. This was, I think it was Christine. This is specific to the Thomas property in it. And without spot zoning, which is something that's like a 4-letter word for some people, it's how many other properties would this be applicable to that wouldn't require a special use permit? Because there might not be there might not be too many properties that you could do this with. I'm just wondering, then if there isn't, then I don't think there's too much concern like what Gail brought up earlier as far as density. And I mean, how many properties out there could actually sustain an existing dwelling plus an accessory building with a 513 in it that are owned by the town?
But again, it doesn't need to be a dwelling. It could be town hall.
Okay.
It could be any.
Commercial, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
there might be
you know,
quite a bit
town
more
hall is a
than you
good
think of.
example. Is like you take town hall, I don't think it would behoove the neighborhood to necessarily put, or that piece of property to put 4 accessory apartments on it. I don't know, but
Yeah, and that has not been discussed. I'm just throwing it out.
yeah,
there
no,
that
I
if
appreciate
we're
that's like,
Yeah.
you know, but we have an inventory of town properties.
Mhm.
We know what we
Yes,
have.
we do. Yeah.
And-
We did that when they had the large capital assets committee, I think.
I mean,
Put one together to be updated.
Jen's example of I think sewer company, that there's an apartment there, correct?
Yeah.
And this
Yes.
would allow, in theory, 3 more.
Correct.
So let's just talk hypotheticals. Is that doable down there? Is it okay with anybody? Like, I just don't know. Like, I guess we're making a decision on this and I don't really know what the inventory looks
We're
like.
not making, okay, it's not a decision. It's still a preliminary discussion.
Yeah.
Let me throw that out there. And so what I think we're hearing is that we need some more information. We do want to amend it slightly, but until we see what properties it would be applicable to, we would not certainly maybe want to add the water and sewer in as a requirement, but whether we want other requirements until we see the properties, which we can do next month, that this is probably as far as we can go with this particular discussion until we have a little more information. But I wanted to make sure Allison knew what direction to head in before we meet next time around. So I think that
Margie,
if there's a
Ke-
question. Okay, I see Gail's hand is up and then.
And Kevin Hoyt is,
and then
has his
Okay,
hand up.
fine. Okay, Gail first and then Kevin.
Okay, and actually, I don't want to, well, just quickly, I didn't know if we should discuss the Beck letter because that was brought in about accessory apartments. But Kevin may be on this topic first, so
Mhm. Okay, then I'll go to Kevin.
thank you.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes, I
Okay.
can.
I would just, one thing I would like hugely caution the planning board on is mixing residential use with industrial uses. I don't actually think if we're going to use this ordinance for town employee housing, there is nothing from my perspective that really makes a life on Block Island actually appealing if you're going to house me on an industrial property. And moreover, these are industrial properties, and the whole idea of zoning is to separate out uses appropriately. So I know we have a housing issue to deal with, but I'm not quite too sure that increasing residential use on industrial properties like the sewer plant or the electric, like especially adjacent to the electrical plant, which has been talked about, is a really good idea. Second, I can work with Allison outside the meeting. There's some really easy ways where you could develop using GIS analysis to figure out development density and what would be suitable, and just doing calculations through a GIS analysis of the property and the abutters. And then also, and that can essentially, that calculation can become part of the 513 ordinance. And lastly, part of that can be, we essentially in our zoning ordinance promote increased development or increased use when you have sewer and water. All that has led for on the island is expansion of the sewer and water districts. And all that does is impact our groundwater. And I can speak to that from a very informed opinion. So I would say that yes, whether or not a property can support an additional residential use like an accessory apartment is an important consideration, but I wouldn't essentially preclude using on-site wastewater treatment as a means of disposal. This was brought up to my concern by a town councilor when I talked about I talked about it with them about the same property that I think Gail is discussing. And she says, well, you need one of those fancy septic systems. And I said, we've been using these things for 20 years. They work. And not only that, but they actually become an asset that's leverageable. So I just would caution you about precluding 513s when a property is served by an OWTS. We're at the point in Rhode Island where on-site wastewater treatment can be a more sustainable technology than centralized sewers.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So Allison, since we've allotted a half an hour for this discussion to pick it up again next month, is this enough information for you to work a little bit this coming few weeks?
Yeah, so it sounds like, yeah, the planning board doesn't agree with sending it forward as is. You want to do some changes and more analysis and discussion.
I think tweaking it, I think, is what we had in mind. So what I'm hearing. Okay, so
we weren't going to preclude any 513s outside of sewer and water. It was just a matter of density, like on
the
that
density
site,
level,
potentially.
exactly.
Not to they certainly would be allowed throughout the island, and you know, industrial sites wouldn't be prioritized. We're talking first probably about Thomas property. And there's other properties, more residential, that where the 513s would likely be cited.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good. So
Margie,
I think
that's
you had
just
your.
with, Margie, that's just with section
Sosha,
F
then
though.
I'll go to Chris. Sosha,
Okay. So I'm still a little bit confused, and I was reading page 2 of 6, and I thought that I found what might be considered a disincentive for people to create 513s. It says that the withdrawal fee to the tax collector is 10 times the average annual real estate and improvement tax savings the subject property has received the benefit under. So if I were a layperson, I'd say, why even bother investing in a 513 if I have to pay such a large penalty? It seems to me that by renting out a property at a lower rate to make it affordable, I've already paid my dues, so to speak. Can somebody clarify that for me?
Sosha, that's going to be for the discussion for next month. Right now,
Okay.
we're working just on page 6. So it's a good question. We will certainly pick up with that next month.
Margie,
Gotcha.
you have somebody in the audience with their hand
Okay, I
raised,
told her-
and if I could just
Okay.
ask the board members to jump in for discussion instead of raising your hand, because we do have about 30 people in the audience, so I just want to be able to keep track of everybody.
Okay,
So
I've
the
got
phone
to-
number is 3233.
Hi, this is Kristen Bauman. Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Okay,
Hi, everybody. Hi, Planning Board, and 30 people in the audience. That's quite the audience for the Planning Board. I wanted to, when I reviewed the agenda today at Clerkbase and I was able to click on the amendment or what you're discussing now, I wanted to ask if anyone was considering including ownership of 513s and changing that part of the zoning ordinance section, if that was still on the table, if anyone had questions about that, or any thoughts on that, or maybe that's also pushed off till next month.
That's pushed off until next month.
Okay. And I kind of really liked that I spoke after Kevin because, you know, that's part of what we're saying, that the 513s that are already built are built and they're not going to further, burden our infrastructure. They're built. And so really what I'm proposing is that we save them as 513s through ownership. Thanks to Kevin for bringing up that point, and I hope that makes sense to everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Good.
you.
We will see you. Well, tune in with us next month. All right, Chris, going back to you, you had a question? Chris, you're muted. Chris,
I
you're
wanted
muted.
to, I have other things in here to discuss, but we'll wait till next month,
You wait
so-
till next month. I picked, since we allowed just a half an hour for this, because as you know, we do have other things on
Yep.
the agenda. And I'm also hoping that by next month, we will also have some input from several of the committees that have been taking a look at this so that we'll have their thoughts and ideas as we go to discuss some of the other topics. So I think we will, unless there is any other comments, I will close this section and we'll go on to number 2.
Before you go on to number 2, I think we need to discuss the notice for Milliken and Phelan, because I have received several text messages and emails during this meeting that the notice was misleading, and I think that I sent it to Bill Landry so he could review it. So I think rather than having everyone wait if they're not going to go forward.
What was misleading?
The if it was in person or if the meeting was going to be on Zoom, and we didn't, I think that
Okay.
we didn't know what was going to happen. So the planning board has been meeting or last month met via Zoom. So I will put Attorney LaPlante and Mr. Priestley.
Can I ask you a question first?
Sure.
Is the notice the same? Joe Priestley sent me his notice. Is the notice for Phelan the same as Joe's substantially?
Yes.
And the second question is, what are the circumstances of the people who are concerned about the notice? Are they people who went to town hall and were not able to get in, or people who, I mean, if they're on the Zoom call,
It's my
they're
understanding
in the
they,
meeting?
correct. It's my understanding they did come to town hall and they were instructed to how to get onto the Zoom call and that they are on Zoom right now.
Right, so are we fairly confident that anyone who went to the town hall is in fact on the call, or everyone we know about, right?
I was already in this meeting, so based on what I've been told, everyone is on this, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay. All right, well, I do want to hear, I think we should hear from the two attorneys. The way I see it, the notice is a good notice. It's really all that could have been done by the people who were involved in doing it. The governor's executive order was set to expire on February 4th. Nobody knew if it would be extended or not. And the notice gave an alternative that might occur. Basically, it left it up to the reader of the notice to inquire if there was, if they were planning to go to town hall, to inquire that that's the way it would actually be proceeding. I think the notice is probably okay. I think it's more likely than not that the notice would be deemed okay. There is, however, a possibility that somebody drove by town hall and saw the lights off and didn't try to get in and isn't on this call. I guess that's a possibility. So I think it's really up, and nobody on this call, I'll only speak for myself, I can't say with absolute certainty, whether if this notice were challenged as defective, that a court would never rule that it was defective. I think it's more likely than not that the court won't rule that. But the people who are at risk of this having to be done over again, if that occurs, are the parties before the court. Their attorneys did everything that they could under the circumstances to issue a proper notice. And I think the notice was more likely than not proper. But the only way to be 100% sure that the notice could not be deemed defective would be to renotice the meeting and have these hearings take place next month instead of this month, or at some other time in the future. That's up to the parties.
I can tell you that the town hall is still open and there are people, I'm here and there are people working in this building. So just,
yeah,
I don't know if that helps or not, but.
So Bill, I appreciate it. It's Brian LaPlante on behalf of the Phelans. I agree with you. I agree with the sentiment you just communicated. I think the notice is fine. Obviously, none of us can say that with any certainty. A judge wouldn't find otherwise, but I don't believe that there's any defect in the notice. I think the fact that town hall is open at 4 p.m. is also helpful in the sense that if there was a need for someone to go home, they could do so and connect via Zoom. I also think the notice was put out well in advance of the meeting, and whoever had a question about where or how they would participate could have called the town hall to ascertain how it would be held. So I feel abundantly confident that this will be sufficient notice, and my clients want to go forward.
Bill, Joe Priestley on behalf of Charlie Milliken. I will echo both what you and Mr. LaPlante have said. And Mr. Milliken would like also to go forward. I would also say that as of right now, we don't know whether next month or the month after or the month after that, meetings are going to be Zoom or live. So we are going to always have this issue as long as you don't know which way you're going to meet a month before the meeting in sending out a notice. So I think we've done everything we can to properly notify. People reading it carefully should have known there was a difference. They had it in plenty of time, and we should be allowed to go forward.
Madam Chair, I would say that it's reasonable to proceed. There's always risk and nobody can be sure, but I think the reasonable approach here is to leave it up to the applicants to decide, whether they want to go forward or not. Both have indicated that they do, and I see no reason why we shouldn't from a legal perspective.
All right, with that stated, then I think we will go on to number 2. And of course, the minutes will show this discussion. So if there is any question down the road, everybody will know that we have discussed it. Okay, number 2. Kastner, Matthew and Jonathan, plat 14, lot 5, application for a final plan stage by the Block Island Conservancy and Kastner for a minor subdivision for land off of Cumulus Road. Because I have family involved in this, I'm going to recuse myself and turn the meeting over to Christine, who is vice chair to run it. Christine, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. So I believe that we have a preliminary decision, and I'm going to make a motion to approve that preliminary decision that I'll read into the record. And if I get a second, we can discuss it.
Second.
All right.
Excuse me?
All right. Joe, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I thought we were here for final plan approval. The preliminary decision was already decided and has already been recorded.
That's correct. I'm sorry, you're right. This is a decision. We've already done
Final
a preliminary decision. You're correct.
You meant maybe draft, Christine, like
Yes,
draft,
the draft.
draft decision.
A
for
preliminary
plan
final
approval.
draft.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what we're looking at.
So the motion will be to approve the final plan stage by Block Island Conservancy for a minor subdivision of land off Cunimus Road.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. So the decision includes the waivers. First, the waivers where the planning board approved the waivers from section 1005 of the subdivision regulations and creation of a 10-foot wide utility easement for existing utility services, when a 20-foot is the standard, and a waiver from 1006 street design standards to not construct the cul-de-sac as shown on the plans. In both of these instances, the planning board finds the waivers reasonable, consistent with the purposes and intents of the regulations and the comprehensive plan, and in the best interest of good planning practice. The findings of fact, and there are 8, so bear with me, and then we can discuss each of them, is the planning board makes the following findings of fact in approving the subdivision application. The subdivision is consistent with the New Shoreham Comprehensive Plan. The comprehensive plan encourages the set aside of land for open space and subdivision and describes the RA zone as being comprised primarily of rural land remote from the village center and served by narrow lanes. The following policy and actions are listed within the comprehensive plan. RC1A, increase the inventory of conserved lands in order to protect natural resources, including habitat and water quality, and to preserve the island's scenic landscapes. RC1A3, prioritize the conservation of lands abutting conserved lands to create large protected greenways, habitat areas, and opportunities for trail extensions. Findings of fact 2, the 2 lots for current or future development in the subdivision conform to the standards and provisions of the New Shoreham zoning ordinance. There are currently 2 existing residential structures, one on the property, each of approximately 1,452 square feet and constructed in the 1970s. Each structure is to be located on a separate lot, and a third lot is created of approximately 2.25 acres will be not for development and conserved by the Block Island Conservancy. The land areas of several easements shown on the proposed plan are deducted from the total gross land area of the proposed lots for development in order to determine if the developable lot land meets the 120,000 square feet minimum for the RA zoning district. Lot 2 has a total gross area of 128,937 square feet, which is 2.96 acres, and a total of 120,367 square feet of developable land. After deducting utility easement areas of a total of 8,570 square feet. Proposed Lot 1 includes 128,598 square feet of developable land. The plans demonstrate the lots meet the zoning requirement of 200 feet of continuous right-of-way frontage. Point 3, there will be no significant negative environmental impacts from the proposed subdivision. The subdivision does not involve the construction of roads or other development. The 2.25 acres lot not in development would create a continuous network of conservation properties connecting adjacent lots. To the east, Plat 1326, owned by the Block Island Conservancy, and Plat 1327, owned by the Nature Conservancy. And to the west, Plat 14, Lot 7, owned by the Block Island Conservancy. A conservation restriction prohibiting any future development in perpetuity for proposed Lot 3 was included in the final plan submission. The 2 other lots are already developed with existing residential structures. 4, the subdivision will not result in the creation of individual lots, which with such physical constraints to development that building on those lots, according to the pertinent regulations or building standards, would be impracticable. The subdivision does not involve additional lots for new development. 2 existing structures will be located on each of the lots for current, future development, and the 3rd lot is for conservation. 5, all subdivision lots have adequate and permanent physical access to public street. The plan creates a 20-foot wide-way access easement over the existing gravel driveway to formalize access to proposed lots 1 and 2. The plans show a cul-de-sac with a turning radius of 45 feet to achieve the 200-foot required frontage for proposed lot 1. The design of the cul-de-sac would be within the 20 feet of the existing residential structure, and the applicant requested and received a waiver to not construct this roadway. A note on the final plan states the access easement shall be mowed and maintained between 4 to 8 inches. The subdivision plan demonstrates access to public road through a 20-foot right-of-way to Lewis Road and Cherry Hill Road. 6, the subdivision provides for safe circulation, suitable building sites, and the preservation of natural, historical, and cultural features, and contribute to the attractiveness of the community. 7, the design and location of streets, building lots, utilities, drainage improvements, or other improvements in each subdivision lot does not create flooding or soil erosion. This subdivision does not involve construction or associated creation of roadways, installation of utilities, or drainage improvements. 8, the project will not impair scenic views, burden an existing water supply, result in increased traffic congestion, create any ground or surface water pollution, alter or cut stone walls, or disturb any identified unique or significant historical or archaeological sites. Lot 1 includes a small easement area around the Palatine gravesite. The subdivision does not include plans for development, installation of utilities, or site work, and therefore should be no disturbance to the gravesite or other cultural resources such as existing stone walls or scenic views. Conditions for the preliminary plan approval, there are 2. 1, a suitable, compacted, and adequate area sufficient to provide safe circulation of vehicular traffic and emergency access in lieu of the cul-de-sac or hammerhead constructed to town specifications shall be provided and maintained. The owner shall clear existing brush within the access of right-of-way shown in the plan and maintain this clear vegetation travel way of 20 feet in order to facilitate emergency access to residential properties within the subdivision. 2, confirm with the New Shore tax assessor that lot number assignment be incorporated on final plan Mylar and be recorded. Approval of the subdivision shall expire in 1 year from date of approval. Vesting may be extended for a good cause shown if requested by the applicant in writing no less than 30 days prior to the expiration date and approved by the planning board. Any discussion? Would you like to go through each item? Any questions? From the planning board.
No discussion.
Thank you for reading all that, Christine. You did, because you read it, I caught a couple typos that we can correct. So instead of moving the access road, you're just going to be mowing the access area.
Yeah.
Not moving it, and preliminary goes to final. So we'll clean that up.
So different when you read it out loud. So, yeah. Anybody in the attendees want to make any comments before we move
I
on
would
this?
just like to say that we think that that motion is clear and distinct and concise and very suitable to the purposes and the conditions of the application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine, could you just do a roll call vote, please? And Dory has her hand up raised.
All right, let's hear from Dory first, and then we'll do the vote.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for considering this. And I also wanted to say thank you to the Kastners for moving forward with this, because it will allow us to expand the walking trails that are in the Windodge Preserve with this piece of property that connects in there. So that'll be a nice addition. And they've also allowed for some guided tours to the Palatine grave sites. And also in our agreement, which I think we've mentioned before, there'll be restrictions to how large dwellings could be there should they at some point decide to replace them. So I'd like to thank the Kastners if they're here for that, and thank you all for your consideration.
Okay. So do I have a vote? Should we vote on the motion? Gail?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Sosha?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I guess that's all of us tonight.
You should vote
Do
too,
you
Christine.
vote in favor?
I vote aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Margie is going to rejoin the meeting, and it'll just take a second.
Okay, so we're getting ready for item 3, the Milliken application.
Correct.
Thank you very much, Christine. We will go on now to number 3, the Margaret and Charles Milliken Trustees Plat 8, Lot 194-2, fire number 1232. Public hearing for the preliminary plan stage of a minor subdivision for the above referenced property on Pilot Hill Road. I will make a motion. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, if anyone is in the audience that is going to speak, could you just raise your hand and I'll promote you to a panelist so you have the opportunity to speak to the board members.
While that is going on, I'll make a motion to open the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second,
All right, Chris seconds. All those in favor, Gail,
Aye.
Sosha,
Aye.
Christine,
Aye.
Chris,
aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I also vote aye, so motion carries unanimously. All right, the public hearing is now in session. Who would like to do the presentation?
Morning, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Joe Priestley from Mr. Milliken. Jen, I thought Charlie Milliken would be here and Kevin Hoyt.
They are, and I'm having trouble getting them on the screen. I think it's working now.
I see Kevin, but I don't see Charlie. Yeah, there's Charlie.
Okay, got it.
This is Charlie Milliken's proposal to subdivide an existing 7.7 acre parcel of land containing 335,885 square feet into 2 lots. It's laid out on the preliminary plan, minor subdivision of lot 194-2, Assessor's Plat 8, located on Pilot Hill Road in the town of New Shoreham, owned by Margaret Milliken Trust, dates 7/9/17, last revised 5/21/21 by Hilburn Land Surveying, which is in your file. The lot contains a significant freshwater wetland, which has been located on the subdivision plan. The field location of the wetland was approved by the Department of Environmental Management, Office of Water Resources by letter dated April 15, 2021, which is in your file. The Office of Water Resources has also reviewed and approved the soil evaluation form prepared and submitted by Kevin Hoyt in its application number 1822-0293, also in your file. One of the lots is located on Pilot Hill Road, and the other is located easterly of Pilot Hill Road on an existing right-of-way which will be improved to town standards as set forth in the site plan for proposed subdivision boundary, Block Island, AP8, lot 194-2, prepared by Seth J. Lemoyne, registered professional engineer. This is also in your file. Mr. Lemoyne's plans show the location and composition of the proposed rose bed within the right-of-way and include erosion controls, soil stabilization controls, method of road construction, and proposals for right-of-way maintenance. Mr. Milliken proposes to construct the roadway after preliminary approval and before the final plan is recorded, so there will not be any need for bond. The lot on Pilot Hill Road is already developed. There's an existing single-family dwelling unit on it. It contains 126,624 square feet of land, of which 120,285 feet is developable. The second lot shows the building envelope adequate to support a single-family dwelling unit and appropriate development and a possible house location. Mr. Milliken has no near-term plans to develop this lot. It contains 199,260 square feet of land, of which 148,780 square feet is developable. Any development on this lot will occur outside the perimeter wetland established by the Department of Environmental Management and in conformance with section 506 of the zoning ordinance as it relates to the proximity of on-site wastewater treatment systems to freshwater wetlands. The frontage for this lot is on the private road to be created. Mr. Milliken has asked for and received waivers from item number 10 and 11 on the preliminary subdivision checklist, which is proposed drainage plan and surface runoff calculation and landscape plan. The only structure on the property is the existing house. Ms. Ring noted certain apparent structures apparent on a Google aerial review of it. Those were temporary storage vehicles, and they've now been removed from the property. Finally, Ms. Ring also added a question about existing stone walls on the property. There is no plan to remove any of the stone walls, all are to be maintained. So essentially, it's a simple 2-lot subdivision. The lots are significantly larger than, well, one lot is significantly larger than required, the other slightly larger than required under the ordinance. All utilities will be provided over existing rights of way or via Pilot Hill Road, and all utilities on the site will be installed underground.
Okay,
That's-
thank you.
My president, Mr. Hoyt is here if you need to ask him any questions, and so is Mr. Milliken.
All right, are there questions from the board?
No.
Okay,
I have a question.
go ahead, Gail.
Thank you. And part of this is because I'm still learning, but I had a couple of points just to ask. And sorry, Charlie, I'm learning on your application. But I'm wondering who reviews and confirms that the abutting properties deed has the correct wording to offer the vehicular and utility access to the new lot, 194-3.
We
go
assume
ahead.
that as part of our plan, and it's actually owned by the Millikens, and there is an existence. So we've already done the title on that. They've potentially granted the right of way to themselves.
Okay. And if the proposed single-family dwelling is cited on the new lot, are we to expect verbiage on the map that this is not an approved site? Like, just meaning we haven't determined that all the proper setbacks from wetlands have been determined or granted, and the structure size and dimensions are not considered as approved.
Well,
Because I noticed there is
the
a,
proposed building, we say, was just because your application requires you to show a building site on it. We would imagine on the final plan that building be removed since it's not on the property, with the building setback and the wetland setback shown on the plan.
okay. And then, and maybe the same will apply for the driveway. There's no driveway going into the new lot.
There's a
And
gap.
should there be there?
Well, there was all along the frontage at the time of construction, the owner could choose where he wanted to put that, which made the most sense. He's not limited
Okay.
by the plan. And it would be
Okay.
hard to limit him since right now he doesn't know if, when, or where he would build on the property.
Terrific. Thank you for bearing with my questions. Some of them I'm sure are just normal day-to-day operations for everybody else, but so thank you.
You're welcome.
So Gail, it's Christine. Thank you, Margie. There's always stuff to learn on these applications. And I also had a question about having the proposed development on this application when we're not approving development. I think, is it true that that the applicant is required to put a development on the lot?
The checklist says the checklist asks you to show potential house sites, but in this case, that house is not there. It does show the 50-foot zoning setback. It shows the wetland setback. And as I said, we would anticipate removing that from the final plan because that's house site. We're not asking approval for that house site.
I just think it would be, since we're not considering the driveway or the house site, we're only considering the frontage and I guess the utilities, that anything that we're not approving shouldn't be on the plan.
And we would remove those from the final plan.
Yeah, the master plan doesn't get recorded, but the point is a good one. We've had issues in the past as to what buildings, footprints or building drawings shown on a plan really mean and how integral they are to the plan. This is just a master plan that doesn't get recorded anywhere, but I would suggest that we include language in any actually not a master plan, it's a preliminary plan. It's not a final plan because it's not enough lots, but I would suggest a preliminary plan approval say that the demonstrative house placement shown on the plan shall not be regarded as either proposed or approved or something along those lines. So it's clear that they're not stuck with it, and we're not, and it's clear for us that we're not approving any particular house location at this time.
Okay. All right, other questions from the board?
Margie, I just want to let the audience know that if you're calling in and you press *9, it will raise your hand so that you can speak.
Because we're ready for questions from the community, since the board does not appear to have any more at the present time. While Jen is working on that, Allison, you have comments?
Yeah, I just want to walk through a couple of questions I had, and I just want to make sure Joe had my most recent memo, which is February 1st. There's like an original comments from January, but so one of my questions is in regards to the right-of-way easement. I have a copy of the easement, but I believe the application states that there is a utility easement already in place. I know the utilities are in the roadway, but is that true that there's an easement already in place for utilities?
I think, Allison, that in connection with the final approval, I want to revise that easement to include utilities.
Because I didn't see any language. It just seems to be strictly for vehicular access, and it's not shown on the site plan. There's no, doesn't state utility easement on the site plan. There's no label for that, and I didn't see it in the legal docs. So, and because those utilities are on another property, right? So
I think it should be, no, and I think that easement should be revised so that it specifically includes the installation and maintenance of underground utility lines.
yes, okay.
Yeah.
And let's see, again, a few more things. Okay, and the right of way that is 20 feet wide, and there's some swales, but it seems like the design incorporates pull-offs so that in case there's vehicles passing each other.
Yes, I see a pull-off about halfway in on the, maybe a couple hundred feet in from Pilot Hill Road. I see pull-offs on both sides.
Okay, because because of the way the swales are designed, like I didn't think a vehicle could obviously pull off anywhere throughout that easement way. So like some easement areas are flat, so you really would need to have that pull off area because of the number of.
And we're assuming that the road plan as presented will be incorporated into the board's decision.
Yeah. And then you brought up about, so Pilot Hill Road is paved there. So typically the town asks for a 30-foot paved apron when a private road meets the public paved surfaces.
And again, we assume that'll be a stipulation of the decision, and we will do that.
Charlie was saying, is it on the paved part of the Pilot Hill, Charlie?
I was going to ask that same question. I thought it was off the dirt road section.
Charlie, you're muted.
Charlie, you're muted.
It's on the dirt part of Pilot Hill Road.
Okay.
That's what I
thought.
I pass it every day. I was pretty sure it was on the dirt road, so that would not be applicable for you.
No.
But I do want to get clarification on if we're approving the OWTS in this application.
No, we're not asking your approval of any OWTS. On the lot developed, it's already installed. On the lot to be being created, we're showing you that it can be created, but ultimately we would, at the time of building the house, go through all the steps with DEM and with the town to create an OWTS.
So the siting, that won't be determined. You're not proposing to determine the siting of the OWTS part of the subdivision process. You're going to hold off on that and the house because of the wetland proximity and.
Well, and because right now, Mr. Milliken has no plans to build that house. And, it may be 10, 15, 20 years down the line. So, and rules may have changed between now and then. So.
Well,
we would
right, as of
expect-
July 1, yeah, things are about to change, yeah. So that's why I was curious about the timing, it was hard to comment on.
So we would
on,
expect to conform to the.
Yeah,
ru-
when I know
we
that
have
the-
enough-
the regulations are gonna change. Okay,
And we have enough area in place to conform to the rules at such time as we decide to, as Mr. Milliken decides he wants to build.
Joe, can I jump in for 1 second?
Yep, that's Kevin
Sure.
Hoyt.
Yep, Allison. to
All right,
address your
Kevin, go
point-
ahead.
To address your concerns, the soil evaluations, because of the way the rules are written, they do essentially, Charlie and I worked to ensure that the soil evaluations would be as practically as far away from the wetlands as is required by the 506 ordinance. So you see the 2 soil evaluation test pits
yes,
located to the
so those are
southeast.
150 plus.
Yep,
Mhm.
yep. So the soils are suitable for on-site wastewater treatment, and I've discussed with Charlie to address the you raised with the freshwater wetlands rules changing, and we're moving ahead with essentially addressing those concerns. So.
Okay.
Margie, I just wanted to note that the highway superintendent did recommend an apron for this project.
Even though it goes into a dirt road?
That was the email I received, yes.
Okay.
We'll clarify that with, like,
Wait, I think,
we could just make sure that that's still the case, that if it's because there was a couple subdivisions, right, Jen? We were like, so we'll get back to him on that.
I would just, from an environmental perspective, I would not suggest adding any impervious surface in this area. And moreover, given that both sides of the road are gravel, and since we have a proposed gravel driveway, which will be pervious, I would suggest that a 20-foot long or 30-foot long concrete apron is not going to last. It's not going to provide any benefit to the project or to access to the individual single-family dwellings there. I don't think that that's appropriate in this particular location.
Yeah, and I think there's alternatives to paving, that are more pervious, that we don't necessarily need asphalt in our aprons.
not only that, it would look at, really and truly would look out of place. Pilot Hill, everything is our dirt roads. So coming into it in that particular area. It's only when you get further over toward the school that it becomes paved. Okay.
And if anyone in the
Okay.
audience, yep, it's
Okay,
star,
we're ready
it's
for an
star
audience
9.
question?
Yep, okay. Neil, you have your hand raised and you are on,
Hi, can you hear me?
yes.
Hi,
Yes, you
Charlie.
can.
So I'm the Karen Neil Breslin you see on the map. I don't know which you have in front of you. So of course, our biggest concerns are the right of way. Sounds like there's nothing's going to happen with the right of way. Sounds as if there's a chance it may be improved. Is that part of the plan, Charlie?
Yes.
And then secondly, there is a driveway into the lot. I would imagine that's pretty much what you would imagine the driveway would be.
That's the temporary driveway into that lot. It will probably be in that general area, I would assume, yeah.
Right. And then the one thing I just was struck is the discussion of pull-offs. There is actually no pull-offs on that stretch that you've spoken of. I think it's exactly 20 feet wide in between where from Pilot Hill Road to where the current drive that Charlie's using, there is no pull-offs. I don't know if the pull-off needs to be put in. Maybe it does because there'll be more traffic potentially. So something. that
I mean, the plans show, the plans show pull-offs approximately at the middle of the boundary. It's shown on the subdivision roadway plan by Lemoyne, by Seth Lemoyne. It's about 150 feet or so in from Pilot Hill Road, and it shows pull-offs within the 20 feet on both sides of the 12-foot traveled way.
I mean, I
To
don't.
be created.
Those are
Like,
to be
it-
constructed.
It
Drive up and
doesn't,
down that road every day. There's no pull-offs. so
it's
one
to be,
down the road.
To
Yeah.
be
To be
created.
constructed.
Yeah.
okay, not current conditions, right? These are the improvements that you stated would be done prior to final approval of the subdivision?
Correct.
I mean, that's also fine. I mean, then secondly, I guess the whole point of this is to build a house. But we're sort of abandoning discussion of a house because you're just approving a subdivision. So do you approve a subdivision without the thought of a house going on the property? Or is it a subdivision being approved for building a house?
It's a subdivision being approved to create a lot, and someday in the future, it's a lot that satisfies all the current zoning standards and planning standards to allow a house to be built upon it. And someday in the future, Mr. Milliken can choose, if he wishes to build that house. He may never build that house, but the lot will be created with satisfying all the current standards and not requiring any variances.
Right, and then there is a sort of proposed size of the house in the lot. Will that be part of the discussion in the future?
No, the lot will be limited by the zoning ordinance and the zoning ordinance alone.
Right, and then the other thing that was discussed, and I think it's been evaluated, obviously it's going to be a septic system. There's no environmental impairment or concerns because we are surrounded by water.
No,
I think Mr. Hoyt can address that.
the soils are a future proposed OWTS will be compliant with RIDEM rules for OWTS and the town of New Shoreham 506. And by being compliant with those rules, the sufficient or adequate protection will be maintained to groundwater and surface water features.
And then there is a proposed site for a single family dwelling. In the back end of the lot, there's no chance, or is there potentially you can put two houses on that lot?
The zoning ordinance currently does not allow two dwelling units. It allows a single family residence with a residential accessory structure. It allows other accessory structures, but the lot being created will be a lot in the RA zone on which one single family dwelling unit is allowed.
Right. And then the
There wouldn't be any
subdivided lot.
further subdivision.
Right, there's also like 194-2. So a second dwelling could be put on the lot that is behind this lot.
There are two lots proposed. One has the existing house along the road, and that is called on the map, lot 194-2. The
Okay.
proposed lot 194-3 is a lot on which a house could be built in the future.
And then one last thing, just to join in the discussion of the apron. I mean, I think if we put an apron on this new right of way, it would probably be the only right of way or road running up Pilot Hill with an apron. So I would be with others in suggesting obviously an asphalt or hardtop apron would not be appropriate if an apron is appropriate at all, especially if Charlie is going to improve the road or if that's part of the plan. That would just be my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anything else?
Margie?
That's it from me.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Appreciate it. All right, Christine, you have a question?
Yes, so in your application, you asked a waiver from the number 10 on the nutrient and the water runoff calculations, stating that you talked to the town engineer.
Well, in fact, those were granted, my understanding is, when this application was accepted. Those have already been granted by the planning board.
So wait, this application is already accepted? I thought, and why are we here?
No, before you schedule it for hearing, you have a ruling on the request for waivers, was my understanding.
Did we have that?
Call that.
I think this is the first time I've discussed the Milliken application.
They haven't voted any waivers.
Because we filed a letter requesting them on September 1, 2021. I thought we'd been here before. Maybe I'm mistaken.
You were at pre-app maybe before COVID, I would say. Is that
Well, anyways, we are requesting that you waive the proposed drainage plan and surface water runoff calculations. We have them, the road has been reviewed. It's a permeable surface with swales, and it has been reviewed by the town engineer, is my understanding.
And did it have the runoff calculations, the review?
There weren't any that were provided. We asked for a waiver of those.
Could we get clarification on that?
So, yeah, because did the town engineer submit anything to the town about reviewing the proposed road? I mean, he had a letter stating that stormwater management would be submitted, right?
I will check right
Well,
now.
to pull up there was a brief memo. I know there's a few applications tonight, just to make sure. And I didn't see anything about his review of the road improvements. But
Can I
I did see
jump in?
Joe, I did see you said you spoke with him, but I don't think the planning board has anything in writing.
I didn't speak with him. My understanding was that Seth Lemoyne reviewed his plans with him.
Was that Jim's letter, December 16th, says he finds the preliminary plan meets the requirements of the town. The developer should be reminded that upon the final submission, stormwater detention for each of the proposed residential lots ought to be provided with their submission. So I think it's really going to end up being a final plan approval item.
And that's satisfactory to us.
Joe, can I jump in and talk a little bit about stormwater? And
Please do, Kevin.
all right, so if the board reviews, let's just start from the square one, is that these upgrades to the roadway, the existing roadway, are beneficial to stormwater management and from the existing conditions. The engineer of record for the roadway design has included earthen swales on either side of the road, which in and of themselves are stormwater best management practices. They are designed there to essentially catch any runoff and store it, hold it, and allow it to infiltrate into the ground. Those earthen swales are recognized by Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management as best management, stormwater best management. With regards to a large detention structure for an individual single family, I would just ask for clarification from the town engineer. Single family residential development is treated differently than large subdivisions, 20 unit, 40 unit subdivisions by Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management does have a section of the stormwater management that for single family residential development. And what would be sufficient at the time is when Charlie comes in to develop the lot, to use one of the very simple infiltrative practices. Ultimately, I've spoken with Charlie, and this application will require application at some point when the development is proposed to go to freshwater wetlands for preliminary determination. And my opinion in speaking with the wetland biologist that I work with is that essentially a finding of no significant impact is going to be issued by Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, freshwater wetlands. I appreciate your concerns, but there is plenty of areas where we can address stormwater controls for single lot residential development. Again, this is just one additional lot. And there are technologies and practices that we have in place in our rules in Rhode Island to address that sufficiently. Christine mentioned nutrient reduction. We're going to address that by complying with the 506 rules and complying with the OWTS rules. A large scale nutrient reduction plan would be cost prohibitive to the applicant. Those are usually done for really large subdivisions where you're going to have a lot of wastewater coming in to the ground. The soils are sufficient to support a single OWTS.
Okay, thank you. The application does my reading of it is asking for a waiver, and I'm just concerned. And right now, we're just looking at the development of the road. And I just want to know what, like, I know that you are telling me that these things are going to comply, but I would like to see some documentation on that.
If the board's not willing to grant the waiver, we can proceed, we can provide as a condition of final plan, the stormwater detention analysis that Mr. Jeremiah has requested.
That can be something as simple as a residential rain garden.
Right. That's
That
what
a residential rain garden is essentially adequate for single family lot residential development.
And that would be on the undeveloped lot because the other lot's developed, or I suppose we can do calculations for both lots if he insists, or you insist.
Well, what are we considering right now? We're just considering the road development. We're not considering the lot development.
Well, what Mr. Jeremiah's letter that Jen had on the screen said that he wanted to see storm water calculations for both lots, even though one is already developed and one had no plans to be. If we're limited, if you prefer just us to address just the road, we can do that. I think Mr. Hoyt has explained how that's been done, and we can give you calculations to show that it works.
Christine, I might be able to help on that because you raise a good point. When we're creating lots, we're not approving specific buildings, but typically when we do approve a subdivision, whether it's a very small one like this, or whether it's a 10 lot subdivision, or in some communities, it could be a 300 lot subdivision. The planning board always reviews the stormwater management proposal because it wants to be certain that the lot can be effectively comply with the requirement that there be no net increase in the rate or volume of stormwater runoff. So it's typical to require an applicant for a subdivision at every level to show before final plan approval is issued that the lot that they're proposing to create is suitable, and that the lot that is being modified and made smaller is still suitable for handling whatever drainage is proposed. I agree with the engineer that that's a pretty easy thing to do for residents, but I also agree with your point that the planning board should make sure that that review is conducted, and that typically is done at a final plan stage of review for this type of subdivision. But it ought to be, the requirement for that ought to be incorporated in any preliminary decision the planning board might consider, because nothing's subdivided until that final, the conditions of the final approval are satisfied and a final plan is submitted, gets approved and recorded. You could also require that final approval come back to the planning board for review and not be handled administratively if you want to be absolutely sure you're fully knowledgeable of the drainage implications of this proposed configuration.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Jen, are there any other questions from the audience?
I don't see any hands raised. It's *9 if you're calling in, or just raise your hand on Zoom. Margie, I don't see any hands. I don't know if you want to give everyone a second. It's up to you.
Sure. We'll
Okay,
give them a second just to.
*9 and it'll raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay.
And once you close the public hearing, then the public comment
that's it.
period will be over. So if anyone has questions or comments.
Now is your last chance. Mary, you have a question?
Nope.
Okay. Not hearing
Thank you.
anything else, I'll make a motion to close the hearing. Do I have a second?
Second,
Sosha seconds. All those in favor, Chris?
Aye.
Okay. Gail,
aye.
Sosha,
Aye.
Christine,
I,
Mary?
Aye.
And I also vote aye, so motion carries unanimously. So the public hearing is now closed. Okay, do we need to go over the findings of fact today, or does that get done when the changes come back to us?
Well, I think Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what's being proposed is a master plan, I'm sorry, a preliminary plan approval with conditions as to what has to come back at the final plan stage of review, correct, Joe?
Yes, sir.
So I think you do have to get into the
I go-
findings.
Okay, all right, let's go through the findings. For those of you who have the Allison's memo, it's on page 2. There are 8 of them. I will go through them very quickly and we'll see if we have comments or questions. Number 1, every land development and subdivision shall be consistent with the requirements of the New Shoreham Comprehensive Plan or shall satisfactorily address the issues that may be, where there may be inconsistencies. I think they have pretty much satisfied our questions. So I think there is not a problem, but we will be giving them a list of things they need to fix or add. No comments? Okay, number 2, each lot in any subdivision shall conform to all standards and provisions of the New Shoreham zoning ordinance provided. However, that lots may not be created for the purpose of present or future development, need not meet the area and other dimensional requirements of the zoning ordinance. Comments, questions?
that comes with the if and these 2 sections. Yeah.
Okay. All right, 3. There will be no significant negative environmental impacts from the proposed development as shown on the final plan with all required conditions of approval. Questions?
No.
Right, 4, the project or subdivision is proposed will not result in the creation of individual lots with such physical conditions to development that building on these lots according to pertinent regulations or building standards would be impractical. Lots with such physical constraints to development may be created only if identified as permanent open space or permanent reserved for public purpose on the approved recorded plan, which doesn't apply to us. 5, all proposed land development and all subdivision lots shall have adequate and permanent physical access to a public road. Lot frontage on a public street without physical access shall not be considered compliant with this requirement. 6, each project or subdivision shall provide for the safe circulation of pedestrian and vehicle traffic, adequate provisions for control of surface water runoff, suitable building sites, and the preservation of natural, historical, or cultural features that contribute to the attractiveness of the community. 7, the design and location of streets, building lots, utilities, drainage improvements, or other improvements in each subdivision or project shall not create flooding or soil erosion. 8, all proposed must show evidence of the fact that the project will not A, unnecessarily impact scenic view, B, burden the existing water supply, C, result in increased traffic congestion, D, create any ground or surface water pollution, E, alter or cut through existing stone walls except as essential to provide safe and necessary access to the property and only upon the approval of the planning board, and D, distribute any identifying unique and or significant historical or archaeological sites. Any comments or
Margie.
questions on any of those? Go ahead, Chris. Bill?
Margie, it's Bill. I think we want to consider, in view of the discussions that we've had previously, that finding number 7 that deals with the design and location of streets, building lots, utilities, and drainage improvements, and other improvements shall not create flooding or soil erosion. That's a finding that I would suggest the board make with a comma and the words subject to the conditions set forth below, because we've decided, I believe the direction of the board is in confirming the suitability of the drainage improvements at the final plan stage of review. So you can make that finding now that those issues are managed, but that finding has to be subject to the conditions set forth below. And those conditions, I think, should be 1, that in accordance with the letter of the James J. Jeremiah dated December 16th, 2021, the final submission must include suitable stormwater detention for each of the proposed residential lots. And also condition number 2, that it is noted that the proposed house on the preliminary plan is deemed demonstrative only and is neither proposed by the applicant or approved by the planning board. And I think with that additional language and those 2 conditions, we should be able to address what's been discussed so far. And I just wanted to point that out before planning board members identify any other issues of concern to them.
Yeah, I would just add, we're not approving the OWTS either, right?
No, we are not.
Yeah.
I believe, no, so we would add that, we could add that to the list.
Yes. That the house, add that to the condition that the house and OWTS location are deemed demonstrative only and are neither proposed by the applicant nor approved by the planning board. As a practical matter, the planning board doesn't
Yeah.
approve OWTS's anymore anyway, but I think as a precaution, that's a perfectly appropriate addition to the proposed decision.
Thank you. Excellent. Are there any other additions or that we want to add as for the preliminary, for the findings or restrictions?
Joe already mentioned the utility easement. I'll put that in as a final plan of condition. So updating the legal language of the access right of way to, or incorporating a utility easement, some legal language, and then also putting it on the site plan.
Do we need to do anything about the stone, stating that the stone walls must remain?
I believe the applicant said that they would, but
Yeah, they would, but I wondered if it needs to be listed.
Yeah.
I'm just asking either Allison or Bill if we need to say something about the stone walls.
If it's important, if it's an important issue, and it sounds like it is, I see no reason why it shouldn't be included if that is in fact what the applicant is proposing to do.
But part
need
of
a
them has
break
to
for
be
your
removed
driveway?
because of access. Yeah, with the
As long- as
exception of
long as-
driveway access.
As long as it allows us to create a reasonable and adequate driveway access through the wall,
Right.
we have absolutely no objection to that.
'Cause there are two walls that are gonna have to be adjusted for access, and I think you should be allowed to do that. Doesn't.
We need to be
I
allowed
think you
to
have
do
the,
that.
you have that right by right, as I understand it. But
Yeah.
I have no
Okay.
problem with it. I just don't want the stone walls to be removed or damaged. Because they certainly are a lovely thing to have on your property. Allison, is there anything else we ought to be asking, listing?
No, I think I have enough to write up a decision.
Okay. I guess my last question is, we mentioned something earlier about the paved apron. I would not like to put that in the remarks, so I think that we need to have been checked on first.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I agree. Yeah, we will just confirm that. I think it's just a misunderstanding of thinking the roadway was paved. We have a few applications, and some also involve paved aprons. So, yeah, in this case, if it's obviously if it's not a paved road, I don't see, that doesn't seem to be suitable, so.
Okay. All right, so does this give you enough information to write up our facts of finding?
Yes.
Okay, now do we need to vote on that? Or wait, let you do the draft first and then we vote?
You might want to vote on it at your next meeting.
Okay.
Once it's drafted. I mean, it's totally up to you.
I think I'd rather wait for it to be drafted, if that's acceptable to the board. So
Yeah.
we'll do that next month. Okay. If, last chance, any other comments before we move on to the next item?
Margie, just one quick thing. I don't know if it's important, but there was one neighbor that commented the road will not disrupt his access to his property. I don't know if that needs to be mentioned.
Mary, on that one, there is a dispute, a potential dispute between the parties as to whether there is legal access over that way or not. This is not the place to resolve it, but either way. So our plan won't change the existing condition. You don't have the authority, nor should you resolve that situation.
Okay, as long as it answers his concern, which was it wasn't going to change that condition.
Nothing changes.
Okay.
Good. All right, anything else? All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate the input and all the work. All right, number 4, Blake and Michelle Phelan, plat 10, lots 19-1 and 23-1, application for a major master plan stage review and approval of a major subdivision of land located on Payne Road. And this will be a public information meeting.
Margie?
Yes.
I'm recusing from this one.
Okay, please note for the record that Gail is recusing herself.
And Brian, if I have Michelle and Blake Phelan present, would you like me to have anybody else on the screen?
No, that's sufficient. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Madam Chair, and members of the board, this is a matter that most of you are familiar with based upon its long and tortured history. Thankfully, I think we're at a point now where we can bring closure for both the board and the applicants. As the planner pointed out in her memo to you, we procured back in September of 2020 master plan approval to create 3 new lots on this nearly 20-acre site. And there were 3 basically buildable new lots and the Phelan's existing home. Since that time, the Phelan's have revisited their plans and essentially have reduced their ask of the board and are seeking tonight to modify the approval that was provided back in September 2020 to just 2 new lots instead of the 3. And the configuration of the lots is obviously much larger. There were 3 in the field that abuts their home, and now there will be solely 2. The prior filings addressed most of the issues that were raised by the board. I want to revisit one of the issues that was set forth in Allison's memo, which is the water line easement, which runs along the stone wall that separates the Phelan's home from the field. And we had requested that water line easement be consistent with the limited width of that line and how it was dug initially, to be 7 feet rather than the 20 feet called for in the subdivision regulations technically. And so I'd once again ask that waiver be applicable to your approval of this new and reduced subdivision plan. There were a couple of other matters that I want to address in Ms. Ring's memo. One is she had raised, and she does a thorough job, but she had raised the idea of a paved apron, and I reviewed, and the Phelan's reviewed the applicable regulations, and there are a couple of reasons why it's really not applicable to this project. First is the fact that the public roadway is unimproved. And so if you look at your section 1006 street design standards, it references the paving of the apron area, that initial area, when there's an existing paved street, and there's not. More importantly is the introduction to that section. That section concerns, and it says shall be applied in the creation, extension, or improvement of a street. And the Phelan's aren't doing any of those things. They're not creating a new street. They're not extending. They're not improving. It's an existing street on their property that's been there for a long time. And so for that reason, we'd respectfully request that the Phelan's not be required to pave anything out there. I think it's also, from the position of just good environmental practice, not to create an impervious area in that location. But I'm happy to talk more about that if you have any questions about that. The other piece that I identified was, we had talked about what is Assessor's Lot 16, that small site on the north side of the Phelan's property. And it's actually right above that gully that runs along Payne Road. And I did some research to comfort the board, and I want to report the result of it, which is that there is a recorded easement in the chain of title. And in fact, in 2020, a deed was recorded into the current owner, which is Mr. Lamoureux. And that deed recites the historic recorded easement of access to the public right of way to Payne Road over and across the 8-foot easement. That's the 8-foot wide driveway that leads out to the Phelan's private road, and then over to Payne Road. So that's of record. So I don't foresee us having to do anything with respect to that. But again, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure the Phelan's are too. And thank you for your time and attention.
Okay, thank you. I also had on my notes about the 30-foot apron because I was pretty sure that the section of Payne Road that they're off of is a dirt road. And I want to make sure and ask Michelle if she'll verify that, just for the record.
You're on mute, Michelle. You're on mute. You have to take yourself off mute. Down the bottom left.
Here she is. Okay.
We are definitely on the dirt road. Off of
Okay,
the-
thank you. We have that on the record. Thanks a lot, because I picked that up also. All right, questions or comments from board members?
No.
All right. Allison, comments?
Well, I guess one comment on the lot 16 access. So right now on the site plan, it just says driveway. If it is an easement, can we put that on the site plan saying it's an easement and referencing that?
Yes.
deed? Okay.
I think that's a great idea. Absolutely. We'll have the surveyor do just that.
This is a public hearing, so if you would like to speak, just raise your hand or press star 9.
We will wait and see if there's members of the community who would like to comment. While we're doing that, is there any other thoughts from the board members?
Morgan? I just want to ask, acknowledge John Brewing's letter that stated that there was water capacity at this moment for the portions of the property that might go on town water, but that's not guaranteed that it will be there in the future. Is that your reading of it? And I just want to.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. As you know, there's a public water issue out on the island. And so the good news is that the site itself is capable of producing potable water for just 2 lots. And I think the reduction in lots especially helps that. So we have a great deal of comfort and confidence that that's true. Obviously, any home building would be subject to the provision of proof to the town that a home could in fact have potable water. So, but with respect to dividing the property, we have a high level of confidence. I think that it's appropriate to approve us at this stage, but in connection with a building permit, that may be necessary to drill a well.
Okay. All right, Hans, welcome.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
First of all, thanks for letting me just make a couple of comments. And I just wanted to share with this board that we have been working with Blake and Michelle on structuring a couple of documents, mainly conservation easements that address the concerns the Conservancy has had. And we're very close to finalizing these documents, which provides easement coverage and actually amends the existing easement over the other lots as well. So I just would like to share that with the board and leave it to you if you would like to put this on record.
Thank you. And for those new members, Hans is with the Boston Nature Conservancy, is one of their lawyers.
Yeah, sorry.
Failing to we've got a couple of new board members that have just joined us within the last couple of months.
Yes, my name is Hans Burl. I'm the Associate General Counsel for the Nature Conservancy based in Boston, and Block Island and Rhode Island is one of the areas that I cover.
Thank you.
One just follow-up question on that. It doesn't involve changing any of the areas that are considered that are currently under a conservation easement?
It does.
Does that stay the same?
It does not. It amends those easements to limit their use for future development. That's the only change on those easements, and it puts an additional easement on the 6-acre lot that is, which are the 2 lots that are being up for subdivision here.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Jen,
Don't see
did you
any-
get anybody from the audience?
I
or
don't,
the
I
community?
don't see any hands raised.
Okay. One last chance for questions.
Raise your hand or press *9 to speak. I don't see any.
All right, in that case, we will go on to the facts, required findings. Again, for the board, it is on page 2 of your memo from Allison. It's the same questions. Again, do you want me to go through and read them, or can I just go through one by one numbers? Okay, I don't see anybody minding. I'll go through by numbers, see if you have any comments or questions, and then we can list any other items that we want to make sure Allison has to incorporate in the preliminary decision. Okay, number 1, this is land development subdivision. Any problems with that or anything you want to add? Number 2, this is each lot, the subdivision for standards and provisions. Okay, 3, which is no significant negative environmental impacts. All right, number 4, the subdivision will not result in the creation of individual lots with physical constraints. All right, seeing no hands. Number 5, all proposed land development and subdivision lots have adequate and permanent physical access to public streets, lot frontage, etc. Okay. 6, each project or subdivision shall provide for the safe circulation of pedestrian vehicle traffic, control surface runoff, suitable building sites, etc., and natural, historic, and cultural features that contribute to the attractiveness of the community. All right. Seeing no hands. 7, design and location of streets, buildings, utilities, drainage improvements shall not create flooding or soil erosion. And number 8, all proposals must show evidence of the fact the project will not impair scenic views, burden existing water supplies, result in increased traffic congestion, create ground or surface water pollution, alter or cut through stone walls except as essential to provide safe and necessary access to the property, and not disturb any unique or significant historical or archaeological sites. Okay, what other findings would we like to list for Allison to include?
Just that change, Margie, that Allison asked me put on there to change the definition of the access to that lot that doesn't belong to them. It says driveway.
Right.
Number 16.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. I put my map away.
Okay.
I could put it as a
Any other-
condition, or unless we get amended plans like before that and it's already corrected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Allison, have you any questions before you regarding what you're going to say in the draft that you want to clarify, have us clarify? I think this is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I'll pull some findings from the application material, some of which,
Right.
the conservation easement, that the land's conserved, and that will be part of the findings. And the plan also includes, well, obviously the roads have access, the drainage, there's rain gardens proposed on the sites. What else have we discussed during the hearing? Yeah, water access, the water line. That waiver, actually, I guess the planning board maybe vote on the waiver request, and I can incorporate that in the decision.
Yeah.
And this one will come back for preliminary.
Okay. So
So
we
you'll see it
will-
again.
We'll see it again. Okay. All right. One last chance. Any questions, comments? Jen?
And then you do need to make a motion to close the public hearing if that's what you would like to do. Or continue.
We have a problem. We never made, I don't believe I ever made a motion to open a public hearing.
It's not,
I thought you
it's
did.
okay. It's
Okay.
technically not a public hearing. It's a public
Oh, public
informational
information.
meeting.
Yeah.
So no.
It's a
problem.
public information. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It was properly noticed and there was no need for a motion to re-describe what was occurring.
Oh, phew. Thank you, Bill. I got nervous there for a minute. I thought, oh, wait, don't tell me I messed up. Sorry, Michelle, I got very nervous there. All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate all your patience, and we will look forward to seeing you again shortly. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Good. Take care. Okay. Number 5. The Elks, Richard, Joyce, and John, trustees, plat 14, lot 34, fire number 925. Application for development plan review for an application for a special use permit under sections 306E, 401, and 406 to demolish the existing single-family dwelling and rebuild a single-family unit. The single-family dwelling exceeds the limits set forth in sections 306E. Review and act on waivers and set the public hearing.
Margie, I don't know if you want to discuss the date of the March meeting before you
Yes, I think that's an
continue.
excellent idea.
Okay, thank you.
We have, for various reasons, had to reschedule the March meeting for, from March, beginning of March to March 30th. And at 4 o'clock, whether it'll be by Zoom or in person, we don't know yet, but the date is set for March 30th at 4 o'clock. So that everybody does have that on his or her calendar.
I will not be
All right.
able to attend that, Mark.
Okay, so Jen will make a note of that.
And I am not sure yet, but I'll be in touch with Jen.
Okay. Let Jen know because we would need 5 people for a quorum. I guess we
Yeah.
could get away with 4, but I feel more comfortable with 5. So if we find that
The other 5 members are available.
okay. Okay, I think we'll be fine.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. All right, who's doing the presentation for the Elks?
Joe Priestley representing Richard and Joyce L.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, it's a special use permit application. We've requested 3 waivers. They're the waivers requests you usually see. One is from all materials required in support of the special use permit decision revised to reflect that decision. We've given you all those materials, but since your hearing is before theirs, we can't revise them. So we're asking that you waive something that we can't provide you there. On the nutrient loading analysis, again, your ordinance references a pond quality overlay and those standards. That has never been adopted by you or the town, so we cannot comply with that, and we ask that be waived. And finally, it's not really a waiver request, but you require landscape plans for a commercial structure. This is not a commercial structure, so we ask you waive the landscape plan, even though we are in fact provide and have in fact provided a landscape plan in our materials.
Okay, thank you. Christine, question?
Yeah, I have a question more about our application that is used for this purpose, especially on points 2 and 3. The pond quality layover portion, that's come up before when it comes in reference to a nutrient analysis. Does that necessarily void the need for a nutrient analysis because we don't have that section in our ordinance? I'm asking Allison and Bill, like, does it?
I mean, technically,
there's a gap in our ordinance that we actually need to address, but it doesn't mean that a nutrient analysis is not an important thing to have in an application.
Well, there is a provision in the land development and subdivision regulations that allows, once an application, this is development plan review, but once an application has been deemed complete, if the board wants to request additional information beyond that, that's reasonable. It has the ability to do that. Whether or not the item is a checklist requirement like this, or whether it's technically required or not, it does have discretion, but it's a case-by-case basis based on what the board feels it really needs with respect to a particular application.
Okay, so we could, if we decided as a group that that was something that we wanted to see, we could decide that.
I think you could, and I think the zoning board could. I mean, the question is, do you want to do that, or do you want to since it's development plan review where you're advisory only, you could also recommend that the zoning board consider the appropriateness of a nutrient loading analysis.
Can I ask a question regarding the nutrient loading analysis? Is if there was a pre-existing dwelling, a home already there, I could understand wanting an analysis if this was something new. And if I've read the plans right and everything, it's going to actually have a new septic system and everything else. Like, it's going to be updated. So I guess my question is, what's the point? If there's already a dwelling there. I mean,
I'm
agree,
wondering what, can I just quickly add, I'm wondering what pond, because there's wetland, but I don't think there's an actual body of water there. I'm not sure though.
Well,
There's no pond there. There's just there is a wetland, not a pond.
Right.
that section of our zoning needs to be amended for a while, and we should really address that. But I think that in terms of Chris's point, this is a larger structure with a lot more infrastructure in it, and it does include some rain gardens, but I think it would be helpful to have that analysis of what is the impact of that expansion.
The applicant's problem becomes in the zoning ordinance, you specify a nutrient load analysis which meets certain standards. Until those standards are prepared by you and adopted by the town council, the applicant has nothing to compare its nutrient loading analysis to. I would
Right,
also
but
say
as-
that the existing house is actually larger than the proposed dwelling in this case.
Is it? Well, that's true. The other buildings are considerably larger as well as the swimming pool, et cetera, just to make sure that that gets in on the record.
Yeah, the overall impact. And as Bill just pointed out, it doesn't necessarily have to be a checklist item for the board to request it. It's further.
No, but there should be some standard that the application can satisfy, applicant can satisfy. And that was what was contemplated when you adopted the zoning ordinance, that you would establish a standard. And here we are, when that was adopted in 1989, here we are in 2022, and you still have not established that standard. I think it's unreasonable to ask an applicant to meet a standard that you haven't set.
That's kind of my problem with it.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I have
with
to
you,
agree.
Yeah, so, but we can ask Allison to work on that for future subdivisions that come before us or future houses.
Yeah, as part of our, yeah, that's something we can talk about, updating the checklist for this type of application and
I
the
think that's
requirements.
probably a very
so-
good idea. But for this particular application, this is the checklist that we use.
But I think that we, just to push it a little bit further, that type of analysis does help us make that determination about the environmental impact. So if we want to determine if it has no significant increase in the environmental impact, which is one of the considerations that we need to make, you know, that information helps us do that with or without like a standard. It helps us see what is the load right now and what is the anticipated load in the change.
Okay, let's go through the checklist very quickly, and when we get to that one, we could discuss how we want to handle it. Number 1 and number 2 have both been submitted. I don't think anybody has any questions on those. Number 3, they've asked for a waiver. Joe has explained why. Do I need a motion to approve the waiver? Will we finish the whole thing?
Yes, please.
I can't remember.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so we will. So if you agree that that waiver is acceptable, we will approve all of them at the end. Number 4 and number 5 have both been submitted. Any questions on those? Okay, on page 2. Number 6, drainage documents have been submitted. 7, the nutrient loading analysis, which we requested a waiver since we do not have standards for this, which I am inclined to agree with. But I have no problem asking for a zoning board to do something this when we send our advisory. Number 8 for erosion control. Number 9, the waiver has been, the information's been submitted on whether or not this would affect the sites. There aren't any. And number 10, for commercial structures, and number 11, they've asked for a waiver because it's not a commercial property regarding the parking provisions, et cetera. Okay. So I make a motion that we grant waivers number, notes here, number 3, number 7, and number 11. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
I'll second.
All right. Okay. I've heard Sosha first. Any further questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor? Sosha?
Aye.
All right. Mary? Gail?
Aye.
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
And Christine? And I
I'm
also
sorry,
vote yes.
I didn't jump in fast enough. Is This is with the provision that we'll ask the zoning or
We'll ask,
just that
yes, we will ask,
ask for that.
yeah,
Okay.
we would
All right.
ask the zoning board for information. that
What are
they
we asking?
request
Can
the
you just
zoning
be specific? What are we asking the zoning board for?
All right, I'll let Allison give you the proper terminology.
So, okay, so let's, the planning board, it seems like there's a consensus. I know Christine disagrees on, there's a consensus to approve all the waivers requested for development plan review. Christine and Margie are talking about potentially when the planning board reviews the application and sends over its advisory to the zoning board, you may include a recommendation to the zoning board that they explore, like requesting a nutrient loading analysis. I don't think you need to because I don't think the planning board necessarily agrees on that recommendation. So, but we don't need to probably decide that tonight. We're just voting on the waiver requests. So maybe that's just part of the next meeting when you actually review the plans, right? Does that make sense or?
Well, in that case, and my vote is no.
So,
okay, Christine will vote no then. So the motion carries 5-1.
I do have a couple, before the applicant leaves, I have a couple comments, questions.
Good, go ahead.
Okay, there is a retention wall on the plans.
Yes, ma'am.
The dimensions, I was looking for the dimensions for that, or like a cut sheet. Is there a detail?
We can provide that.
That's
for you.
part of the regulations. You may need to request that might be part of the advertisement, right? That Jen had brought up, depending on the size.
Actually, we reviewed that and it's not large enough to require it be made part of that, but we will get you the information to show you.
Okay, so it may not trigger the special use permit, but yeah, we'll at least see the detail on that, the dimensions to confirm. And then also, since living floor area is just so close to the prohibited level, just like 8 square feet off, I'd like to request that the architect kind of break that out a little bit, like show the calculations, demonstrate how that was determined, just so we make sure the project doesn't exceed that limit. We don't want to, that
Understood.
don't want
Understood,
to.
and I'll have them provide that well in advance of your hearing.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Sosha, question?
I'm not sure if my recommendation, if this is the right time or not, so just stop me. When the CRMC's write-up, I read that the project must meet the anticipated rate of sea level rise as well as the accelerated erosion rate. I would like to have some way of confirming that the applicant is aware of the effects of an 8 to 12 foot Category 3 hurricane storm surge on their property. Perhaps they can do that by looking at the storm tools or by getting a map of sorts, but I'd like them to be aware of the potential.
I will raise that with them and we will present to you testimony or something that shows you that they are.
Okay.
That would be fine. Thank you. All right, any other comments? Okay,
Margie, I have one
Christine?
more. I'm
sure.
This is something I haven't seen before, that we have a final decision from CRMC. Usually we see the preliminary decision. So I'm wondering, usually they ask for municipal input on a project before they do the final decision.
They have criteria where if the increase in any development is less than a certain percentage, they will approve it by themselves. This was a small enough change that they granted approval without waiting for municipal approval. It was an unusual case.
Okay, thank you.
And then I just want to remind you to make a motion to schedule the public hearing. So
I will do that.
Thank you.
I have a big note here on my paper. All right, any other questions before I do that?
Just one more question, please.
Go ahead.
When do we find out, or do we have any right to finding out what will be done with the materials resulting from the demolition of the oldest existing structure?
We can have the architects or the builder answer that question at the public hearing. I do not know what their plans are. I assume, yeah, I don't know how they're going to dispose of them, but they'll be able to tell you.
Yeah. It's a
what
cinder
I'm-
block house.
Pardon?
The original structure is
Go ahead.
cinder block.
Yeah, the builder and the architect will
Very
answer that
sturdy.
question. I can't answer that.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure all of us will have a few questions for them when we get together next, so that'll be fine. Okay, one last chance. Any other questions before I set the public hearing? Mary, I think your hand's up.
Yeah, I was right there with Sosha's comment about sea level rise. And can we also just be sure that they're aware of, with that inundation, with the storm, a likely storm, that they understand how it'll affect their water, their well water.
Adding that to my list, we will address that, Mary.
Thank
you.
And Margie, you do have audience members. I don't know, I know this isn't a public hearing and it's just scheduling and waivers, but I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, if there are any community members who have a question or a comment, I would love to hear from them. Any information that we can give Joe to help them prepare for the next meeting is useful.
And
Nope.
it's a star 9 if you're calling in and you would like to raise your hand. I don't see any.
Okay, all right, then I make a motion that we set the public hearing for March 30th at 4 o'clock. Do I have a second? Okay, Chris seconds.
Second.
All those in favor, Sosha,
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Aye.
Christine and Chris?
Aye.
Aye.
And I also vote yes, so motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for coming and thanks for waiting, although you did have to work earlier in the day.
And good night to you all. Take care.
Okay, take
Thank
care.
you.
All right,
Margie, I have a procedural question, please.
sure.
Since you moved the 513 topic to the next meeting and I won't be there, how can I convey my concern or question that I would like to see discussed?
A couple of things. You can give it to me. Second of all, give it to Jen, one of the two of us, it doesn't matter which. And the other thing is, I'm guessing that this will go more than one more month.
Okay.
Since it's only a guess, as the saying goes, make sure you give us the questions and we can give them to the board to discuss.
Thank you.
Because
I will.
I might turn out to
So
be
it was
wrong.
the concern you had on the fees, the paying back of the fees?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did note that, so I can, we'll bring it up for sure. And I know others have expressed that same concern, so it won't be forgotten. But if you have other comments, you could.
No, that was
submit
really
those
my
in
main
writing.
one. And the condo issue, meaning can they be turned into condos?
Okay, yeah, we can discuss that.
That's a good
next.
question. We haven't talked about that recently. Good. Allison, will you make note of those so we don't forget them?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you all very much. If there's nothing else, I'll make a motion that the meeting be adjourned.
Second.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, all those in favor, just yell out yes.
Yes.
Thank you, you were wonderful. See you
Bye.
next
Night,
month.
everybody.
Night.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.